Let me tell you about a 10-minute window on Saturday afternoon, April 26, 2026, that may have just changed the entire trajectory of the most consequential war the world has seen in a generation. In those 10 minutes, Iran sent a diplomatic proposal to the United States. Donald Trump read it. He called it not good enough. He canceled the entire peace mission. And then, within 10 minutes of that cancellation, Iran sent a completely new proposal that Trump himself described as much better. 10 minutes. The fate of the Strait of Hormuz, the fate of 20% of the world's oil supply, and the fate of a war that has already killed thousands of people across the Middle East, all of it shifted in 10 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. And what those 10 minutes reveal about how this war is actually being negotiated, about who has real leverage, and about how close or how far a deal actually is something the mainstream media is not explaining clearly enough. By the end of this video, you will understand every dimension of what happened today, what it means for tomorrow, and why the next 48 hours could either be the beginning of the end of this war or the start of its most dangerous phase yet. Let's go back to Friday, because you cannot understand Saturday without understanding what was set up the day before. On Friday, April 25th, the White House made a big announcement. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had quietly flown into Islamabad, Pakistan. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Trump was sending Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Pakistan on Saturday to meet the Iranians directly. She said the Iranians had reached out and asked for the meeting. She said the White House had seen progress from the Iranian side. She said they were hopeful the talks would move the ball forward toward a deal. It looked for a brief moment on Friday evening like the second round of U.S.-Iran peace negotiations was actually going to happen. Iran's foreign minister was already on the ground in Islamabad. Pakistani officials had ramped up security, soldiers on rooftops, checkpoints at the airport, the Serena Hotel in Islamabad's red zone locked down like a fortress. The entire infrastructure of a major diplomatic event was in place. And then Saturday came, and everything that was supposed to happen did not happen. And what happened instead was something nobody predicted. Here is the timeline, minute by minute, because the sequence is the entire story. Saturday morning, Pakistani officials confirmed that Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi had completed his meetings with Pakistani mediators and was preparing to leave Islamabad. He had met with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He had met with Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir. He had passed messages to the Pakistani side about Iran's position, but he had never confirmed any direct meeting with American officials. In fact, Iranian state media had repeatedly said throughout the week that no direct U.S.-Iran meeting was planned in Pakistan. Araghchi's spokesperson had said explicitly that Iran would only convey its observations through Pakistani mediators. So while the White House was announcing that Kushner and Witkoff were coming to meet the Iranians, Tehran was simultaneously saying no such meeting was planned. The two sides were not even in agreement about what kind of talks were happening. And then Araghchi boarded a plane and left. Minutes after Pakistani officials confirmed the Iranian delegation had departed, Trump posted on Truth Social. He said Kushner and Witkoff would not be traveling to Pakistan. He said it was too much time wasted on traveling. He said the U.S. would handle negotiations by telephone. And then speaking to reporters on his way back to Washington from Palm Beach, Trump said something that is the most important sentence of this entire story. He said Iran sent a paper, a proposal, and it should have been better. And then he said, interestingly, immediately when I canceled, within 10 minutes, we got a new paper that was much better. 10 minutes. Iran, having watched Trump cancel the talks in real time, immediately produced a better offer. Not in a day, not after a consultation with leadership, in 10 minutes. Now stop and think about what that 10-minute response actually reveals, because this is where the analysis gets genuinely fascinating. A government that responds to a diplomatic cancellation with an improved proposal in 10 minutes is a government that already had a better offer prepared and was waiting to see if the worse offer would be accepted first. Iran walked into this weekend's process with at least two proposals ready, one to test American resolve and one to deploy if the first was rejected. That is not the behavior of a government that is confused, divided, or operating in chaos. That is the behavior of a government that is negotiating strategically, that understands American pressure points, and that is carefully calibrating how much it needs to give up and when. Trump himself acknowledged this strategic dynamic when he said Iran has tremendous infighting, a reference to the perceived divide between Iran's negotiating team and its IRGC military leadership. But the 10-minute response suggests that whatever internal divisions exist in Tehran, Iran's leadership was unified enough to have a backup proposal ready to deploy the instant the first one was rejected. And that changes the entire picture of where these negotiations actually stand. Let's talk about what we know and don't know about the substance of Iran's proposals, because this is critical and details are still emerging. Trump said the first proposal was not good enough. He said the second proposal, received 10 minutes after he canceled the talks, was much better. He did not specify what changed between the two. But based on everything that has been reported about the state of negotiations going into this weekend, we can piece together what the core issues are. Trump has been demanding that Iran completely halt all uranium enrichment and hand over its entire stockpile of enriched uranium. Iran has called those demands completely unacceptable and a violation of its sovereign rights. The gap between a full surrender of the nuclear program and whatever Iran is prepared to offer has been the central obstacle in every round of talks. What constitutes much better in Trump's language could mean Iran showed flexibility on the enrichment question, perhaps offering to cap enrichment levels, or to submit to a more intrusive inspection regime, or to delay certain aspects of its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief and a lifting of the blockade. Or it could mean something much more limited, a partial concession on a secondary issue designed to buy time and create momentum for further talks. Without knowing the contents of the papers Iran sent, we cannot know which scenario we are in. But Trump's characterization of the second paper as much better, combined with his statement that negotiations will continue by telephone, suggests the gap between the two sides has narrowed enough that he is not walking away entirely. He is changing the format, not ending the process. Now let's zoom out and look at the full strategic picture as it stands today, April 26th, because there are multiple simultaneous pressures bearing down on both sides that are shaping every move in this negotiation. On the Iranian side, the economic pain is severe and accelerating. Trump himself posted on Truth Social this week that Iran is losing $500 million a day. Iran is also dealing with 55 straight days of internet blackout. Nearly 3,400 Iranians have been killed since the U.S. and Israeli strikes began on February 28th. The U.S. naval blockade has turned away 37 ships as of Saturday. Iran's oil storage capacity at Karg Island is approaching a ceiling, which means if the blockade continues into May, Iran will be forced to cut oil production, not just exports, but actual production, because it will have nowhere to store what it pumps. The economic pressure is not theoretical. It is real, it is accelerating, and Iranian officials are aware that the trajectory gets worse, not better, the longer the blockade continues. And yet the former U.S. ambassador to Bahrain told CNN this week that Iran and the Araghchi have revolutionary fervor and can tolerate pain for a lot longer than most American decision makers and planners calculate. Iran has been under crippling U.S. sanctions since 2018. Its population and its leadership have developed a tolerance for economic hardship that cannot be measured by normal standards. The Iranian government's calculation may be exactly what CNN's analysis suggested, that Trump is under domestic pressure too, with gas prices elevated, midterms approaching, and the war already lasting twice as long as the administration originally projected. Tehran may genuinely believe that if it holds out long enough, Trump will blink first. On the American side, the picture is more complicated than the official confidence of the White House suggests. Trump said this week that the war has had less impact on oil prices and stock markets than he expected. But former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton directly challenged that framing on Saturday, speaking at a Democratic Party dinner in New Hampshire. She said Americans are feeling the truth at the gas station and in the grocery aisle. She said Trump promised to lower prices and did not even try, and that his war is now making things worse. She accused Trump of giving Iran a powerful new strategic advantage by demonstrating that closing the Strait of Hormuz could bring the global economy to its knees. She said Trump walked into a trap. Those are opposition talking points, but they reflect a real political vulnerability. The cost of the war is already exceeding $200 billion. Gas prices remain elevated. Food prices are rising because fertilizer shipments that used to move through Hormuz are being rerouted. And shipping costs globally have surged because vessels are avoiding the region entirely or being forced to take vastly longer routes around the Cape of Good Hope. The economic damage is not contained to the Persian Gulf. It is flowing through global supply chains and hitting ordinary Americans in ways that a president with midterm elections approaching cannot afford to ignore indefinitely. Now let's talk about what happened after Trump canceled the talks, because the story did not stop with the 10-minute paper. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi left Islamabad and flew directly to Muscat, Oman. Oman has been one of the most important back-channel diplomatic intermediaries between the United States and Iran for decades. The fact that Araghchi went to Oman immediately after Islamabad tells you something significant. He is not going home to Tehran to wait for a phone call. He is repositioning to a neutral ground where informal contacts with American officials have historically taken place outside of public view. Iranian state media reported that Araghchi said he had a very fruitful visit to Pakistan. He posted on social media that he is waiting to see if the United States is truly serious about diplomacy. That statement, "waiting to see if you are serious," is a direct public challenge to the Trump administration. It frames Iran as the responsible party that showed up, engaged with mediators, submitted proposals, and is now waiting for America to make up its mind. Whether that framing is accurate or strategic spin, it is the message Iran is projecting to the world right now. And that message is landing in Europe, in Asia, in the Gulf states, in all the countries whose economies are being crushed by a conflict they have no control over. And then there is the global economic dimension that never stops, because the Strait of Hormuz crisis does not pause for diplomatic theater. Oil market volatility has surged to levels not seen since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Commodities and stocks globally have whipsawed in response to every twist and turn in this conflict. A strike, a pause, a ceasefire, a deal, no deal, a cancellation, a new paper. Bloomberg reported this week that suspicious trading patterns in oil futures markets have preceded multiple major Trump announcements about the Iran war, with hundreds of millions of dollars in bets placed minutes before policy shifts were announced publicly. $580 million in bets on falling oil prices were placed just 15 minutes before Trump announced a delay in strikes for talks in March. $950 million in bets preceded the ceasefire announcement in April. $750 million in bets preceded Iran's foreign minister announcing the strait was temporarily open. These are the numbers. Someone, somewhere, has been making extraordinary amounts of money by knowing what was going to happen in this war before it happened publicly. That scandal is now drawing scrutiny in Congress and among financial regulators, and it adds a layer of corruption and opacity to a conflict that is already almost impossibly complex to navigate. Back to the central question of today's video. What does the 10-minute paper episode actually tell us about where this war is headed? Here is the honest answer. It tells us that a deal is possible but not imminent. Both sides are still far apart on the core nuclear question. But both sides are also feeling real pressure to find an exit. Iran sent a backup proposal in 10 minutes. Trump called it much better and said talks continue by phone. Araghchi went to Oman rather than going home. These are the moves of two governments that are searching for a face-saving formula, not two governments that are preparing for military escalation. The danger is not that either side wants to escalate. The danger is that in the space between where the two sides are today and where they need to get to for a deal, something goes wrong in Hormuz. A mine detonates. An IRGC boat does not stop when ordered to. A U.S. Navy commander makes a split-second decision. Any of those incidents could reignite hostilities that both sides are theoretically trying to end. The 10-minute paper shows that Iran moves fast when it needs to. The question is whether Trump will give diplomacy enough room to work before the situation on the water forces his hand. Here is where things stand as the sun sets on April 26, 2026. Iran submitted two proposals in a single afternoon, one not good enough, one much better. Trump canceled a major diplomatic mission and then said talks continue by phone. Araghchi is in Oman. Kushner and Witkoff are back in the United States. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. 37 ships have been turned around by the U.S. Navy. Iran is losing $500 million a day. The U.S. has spent over $200 billion on a war that was supposed to last 4 to 6 weeks and is now in its third month. Global oil markets are more volatile than they have been since the pandemic. And somewhere in a phone, somewhere between Washington and Tehran, the next move in this extraordinary standoff is being calculated right now. Everything is in motion. Nothing is settled. And the 10 minutes that define this Saturday afternoon may be the most important 10 minutes in the entire history of this conflict so far. Comment below right now. Do you think Trump was right to reject Iran's first proposal and force a better offer? Or did canceling the Pakistan talks throw away the best chance at ending this war? And do you believe a phone deal between Trump and Iran is even possible, or does this conflict have to get worse before it gets better? Tell us exactly what you think, because your answer matters, and this conversation is happening right now.